So before we get connected, try it again. John Wesley Powell, second director of the USGS. What's the deal here? I got to get further and further away. So the sesquicentennial, 150 years of Powell's first trip. And it's really fortuitous that I'm after a TR talk, because TR and JWP, they're probably, if not the two most recognizable names associated with Grand Canyon, they're up there in the top 5 anyway. So it's pretty good that I got this introduction from Dick about Teddy to JWP with the reclamation service and things. So from the Powell Memorial to the Plaques at separation, and I'm still getting this feedback, right? Anyway, contrary to appearances, I am not related to John Wesley Powell and never really intended to research him, but after about 20 years, I'm still doing it. Keep going back to Powell, and this year is particularly appropriate. How many people have done a Grand Canyon River trip? Raise your hands. Keep your hands up if you have done the river trip past Diamond Creek down to Lake Mead. Keep your hands up if you have stopped to go up and look at the cenotaph there, the place. So we're down to a couple of dozen. Down around mile 240, and you can see Powell's trip starting in Green River, Wyoming. Separation Canyon is where the plaque is, about mile 240, and on down here to the mouth of the Virgin River, where Powell's first trip in 1869 ended. Powell's journal still exists, and if you read his report and you read all these reprints, it'll say, you know, this is my journal written on the spot. Well, it's not. That's his report. This is Powell's handwriting. Whoop, wrong one. Powell's handwriting. Very brief. You know, he lost his right arm in the Battle of Shiloh in the Civil War and was writing left-handed, so he didn't do a lot of writing himself. And his handwriting through here, this is not. And that's what got me on my exploration in the Powell. I thought this was a longitude, 119 degrees, and I was thinking, well, when they got to this bad rapid and they looked it over, and then we'll get to a bit where why the separation name occurred in the plaques when 3 men left, and thought, well, this is very important. He was trying to convince the 3 guys to stay on the trip, and he was telling them we're at 119 degrees longitude. Did I say latitude before? Longitude, anyway. Anybody know where 119 degrees longitude is? Middle of the Central Valley in California. And I thought, no wonder the 3 guys left. Separation's about 105? I forget. Anyway. Or no, 113. 6 degrees of separation. It's 113. So anyway, that was August 27th. And so you didn't even write August. 27th, Camp 43. And here are some historic photos of Separation Rapid from 2 different views, and Separation Canyon. Great fault here. This is my favorite fault picture in Grand Canyon. I mean, you look at, it's at a little off angle to the river going this way, but look how straight this is through there. It's so cool. And this is the camp on the left bank of the gulch. The plaque is on the river right at Separation Canyon, but they camped on river left, and then in the morning crossed over to river right. The Howland brothers, Ormel and Seneca, they were half-brothers, same father, 2 different mothers. And Bill Dunn, no known photograph, and this is a Native American illustration out of Powell's report. And I apologize to Native Americans that I'm using that, but the descriptions of Dunn are him dressing in buckskins, and he wore buckskins a lot, and he wore them so long that they were oiled and greasy and dirty and slick from the amount of use. So this is Powell's writing on the 28th. The entire entry for when the three men hiked out. And if you read the report, it goes on for several pages, florid language about all that happened. The title of my talk, Boys Left Us, and that refers to the Howlands and Dunn. Don Lago, I don't know, is Don Lago here? Yeah. No, couldn't make it. Found these photos through the Pilgrim John Howland Society. John Howland, they're descended from, was on the Mayflower. So the Powell Memorial up on Sentinel Point, in 1904, 2 years after Powell died, Congress appropriated $5,000 for a monument. It wasn't until December 1916 that it was completed, and less than a year before Grand Canyon became a national park, it was the dedication. And this is the dedication, part of the dedication at the memorial. None of the survivors of Powell's two trips, who were all on the second trip, several of them, got invited. They kind of maybe got a telegram a little late to get there. But Powell's sister, Mrs. Juliet Powell Rice, who lived in Southern California, was there, and Mrs. L.W. Field, this is Louisa Wire Field. She was the widow of Samuel Ichabod Jake Field of Green River, Wyoming, where the elder Howland snuck on the keg of whiskey on Powell's first trip, and Powell found out about it, the wreck at Disaster Falls. Anyway, this is during Arizona Prohibition, and it's particularly appropriate that Colorado River water was poured on the as a dedication in the ceremony by Jake's widow, Louisa. And here's another shot. These are Cole Brothers photos. The Secretary of the Interior was there doing the dedication. And these may be Mrs. Field and Mrs. Rice there. It's hard to tell. But there were very few women in these pictures. And since they're up at the top, I kind of think that's them. So we get to the first separation plaque on the Powell Memorial, and you see that the Howlands and Dunn names are missing from there. And it talks about, and Jerry Snow has talked about this in previous symposium things, about, it says Major Powell was the first explorer of the Grand Canyon, and Jerry thinks otherwise, with Lieutenant Joseph Christmas Eyes having been an explorer in the lower end. And it says, came through traversing the gorge beneath this point. And why are the three men's names off of that? The full crew is on in 1872, and they didn't even go all the way through the Grand Canyon. They left about 100 miles above separation even, which is where the Howlands and Dunn ended to. And you'll see this name here, F.S. Dellenbaugh. There he is, contemporary for that trip around 1872. A Powell, big Powell fan, John Wesley Powell fan. So he self-appoints himself to the committee. So they got the appropriation in 1904, but it wasn't until 1916 that the monument was completed. It went through committees, there was a war, there were all kinds of things going on about the design changes. Dellenbaugh self-appoints himself to the design committee and says, among other things, he says, the major surely would not have approved of doing so. This is correct, leaving off the names of the two Howlands and Dunn because of desertion. It would be a graceful thing, perhaps, to put up on Chevewood Plateau near Mount Dellenbaugh, of all places, a simple monument to them, for they went within a day or two of the end of the voyage, and the major was never condemnatory. So Powell never called them deserters or anything of the like, but Dellenbaugh certainly did in his books and correspondence. He also suggested a plaque in Music Temple where the three men had inscribed their names. And it's a little known fact because they became illegible, although the members of the second Powell trip in 1871 and 72 inscribed their names. This is from a 1938 report of the Julius Stone expedition coming through, and they identified probably the Howlands here and Dunn there. And these are the other inscriptions from Powell's second trip. So Dellenbaugh suggested maybe a plaque there 1932, Julius Stone becomes involved. He writes a book called Canyon Country, and on the back he does a promo for a book called Stanton's Story, which becomes, when it's published later that year, as Colorado River Controversies. And one of the controversies has to do with the so-called affair at separation. And same wording on this blurb. And what is more important, by clearing up the hitherto vague episode at Separation Rapids, it removes from the names of 3 men, members of the first expedition, the undeserved stigma of cowardice. So, in controversies, it goes into this affair and about the pros and cons, mostly the cons against them being with the stigma of cowardice. So 2 years later, 1934, a group called the River Runners called the Dusty Dozen, Bus Hatch and the boys. It's often called either the Eddie Frazier trip. Clyde Eddy had been down the year before with some college students and was coming back on this. He wasn't a boatman. The hatches were, if you hear Brad Dimmock's talk about the hatches and their boats and their rowing style, they set river running back decades with their style. Anyway, they bring down, Doc Frazier has a bronze plaque cast to mount at separation. And this is the wording here about the 3 men, memory of them, who left the first PAL party at this point, August 28, 1869. And they call themselves the Colorado River Club. And there are 5 of them here, the Dusty Dozen. Right here is the plaque. But the copper plaque is not in the picture. I haven't found a picture of the 2 of them together. But let's look at this plaque. It's a piece of copper tin that they took a hammer and a punch and punched their names and the information, the date on it, and there's 7 names. So that's the second separation plaque and the third separation plaque. Remember, the first one with the names missing from the Powell Memorial. So 3 years later, the Carnegie Caltech trip, and Eric Berg's in the audience, and he did talk about this at a symposium. Geologists, and they were mapping, and they get to separation, and here's their picture with a rock hammer, geologist rock hammer. It could be an S-Twing, very popular brand. They write, at separation rapids north of the river and west of the side canyon, a bronze plaque fastened by baling wire was found against the cliff 150 feet above the river. Now, 1937 is Lake Mead is being formed. Hoover Dam is completed, or Boulder Dam is completed a couple of years before. So the water's coming up, but this plaque is mounted 150 feet above the river at this point. And then they say nearby is a handmade sign in tin. So they're referring to that punch plate of the names. But like I say, I haven't found a picture of that or any reference to that copper plaque after this, or the tin plaque. 1939, Julius Stone, some others, Doc Frazier's again on the trip. Frank Swain was on that 34 Dusty Dozen trip, a couple of others. They decide that the wording on that small plaque wasn't adequate enough, so they're going to mount the larger plaque, 1939. They go upstream from Lake Mead. The water is now high enough Lake Mead that they can boat up there. And this is the plaque. Here's the wording, kind of the same, but they say, for further authentic information, see Colorado River Controversies. That's the Stanton book that came out in 32. And then it was placed in 1939, Doc Frazier's. But Doc Frazier takes home that bronze plaque in 1934. And the bronze plaque and the copper plaque were just wired to the rock. And Wayne Ranney can tell us the hardness of that schist that they're trying to, if they're trying to drill holes in there. And I looked it up one time in the hardness scale and all that stuff. And it's pretty darn hard to try to drill in and put bolts or anchors or whatever. So these plaques are just wired. So Doc Frazier takes the 34 bronze plaque home with him. Yep. Come on. Okay, so the big plaque is mounted, and then the bronze plaque is taken. No mention of the copper plaque. But Harry Ailison was working down at the Bridge Canyon dam site down below and separation, or just above separation, and he's going down there and he's noticing floods come through. So that plaque mounted in 39 and floods of 42 and 43, he says, covered the plaque. And this is this great shot. The water has dropped down. After those floods, he's standing on new sediment deposited there. There's 1 foot in the water. And there's the tip of the oar of where the flood came through. So he decides that, this is just water flows. It was 42 is 91,000 CFS, elevation almost full pool, about 25 feet below full pool of Lake Mead. 43, it was only 66,000, but Lake Mead was a little bit higher. So they decided to move the plaque up. And here's a series of shots where it's higher up. Where we got 1949, 1950, and 1952. And Loie Belknap over here happens to be in the audience. So there's this white painted stripe here in these shots. And it's like, why is that there? I don't know. Was it the Bureau of Reclamation saying that was the high lake level? I mean, they had the plaque there, so all they had to do was say high lake levels at the bottom of the plaque. I don't know what it's all about. But 1959, Doc Marston, we heard about earlier, there's still a white line. 1962, P.T. Riley with Martin Litton, still one. 1972, Bill Moose. It's really getting faded. I have not found any mention of why, that even the white line was there or why. So they decide to move the plaque up. Or no, the plaque has been moved up in 43. And then Frankie Fraser, Doc Fraser's daughter, scouts out where that bronze plaque is from 1934. Their father, Doc, had given it to the Utah State Historical Society. She gets it back, and correspondence with Doc Marston, he writes to her, you can get back on that river and find many, many problems easier to resolve than the business of the plaques at separation. To historian Charles Kelly, the correspondence, Doc says, who the hell cares? He answers himself, I do. Here they are in 1971. Frankie's gotten the plaque back. They come boating upstream. They get Park Service approval. Park Service Ranger Jim Bailey is on these shots, involved in it. They're mounting the plaque. Drilling holes in the schist by hand. And here's a series of shots. Harvey Butchert hikes in and joins them. Doc is in this shot, these two shots, and Jim Bailey on the ladder with Frankie. 1972, I mentioned Bill Moo's shot with that faded white line. He's swimming downstream with Jorgen Visbach, and there he is floating there, and he takes a shot with the two plaques in place. That's 1972. 1989, I meet park archaeologist Jan Balsam on this trip, and she mentions she's got the plaque in her office. I saw Jan here earlier. I'm not sure if she's still here, but so I go up to the canyon, visit her, and see that. 1994, historian Roy Webb says, I was just in Vernal at the Hatch warehouse, and I saw the 34 plaque, and I said, wait a minute, I saw it in Jan's office. This is the one Jan has. This is the one with the Hatch family in Vernal, Utah. And here's the story of how it goes. Marv Jensen, the river unit, takes down the copper plaque because it was hanging loose. Vandals are trying to pry it off. Goes to his office with the intent that someone's going to research how to properly mount it. It never happens. Jan talks about how she inherited the plaque. Marv Jensen leaves the park. Kurt Sauer gets the plaque. Kurt Sauer leaves the park. Jan gets the plaque. Thanks, Jan. Got loan of the plaque. Took it on tour. There it is at the Powell Memorial. Here it is, the three names united with the other names from the first Powell trip, covering up Powell's face. some medallions that have been added to the memorial since then. Here it is going downstream. We're back here where it got moved in 71. Here it is, the two of them together. Here's a photo match of a Neville shot. I think, did we see this in Tom's talk, maybe? He showed some of these, I'm not sure. And here it is. There are bolt holes there, and that's where the original was. And you can walk up the hard way and see those bolt holes. And then to Vernal, Utah, to get reunited with the copper plaque. This is Clark Hatch, Bus Hatch's grandson. His granddad mounted that. And this is last year, in April. So they're reunited. Hooray! How about that?